Actraiser 2 awkwardly glided onto your Super NES back in 1993. Developed by Quintet and published by Enix, Actraiser 2 is a direct follow-up to the original Actraiser, which featured a unique combination of both side-scrolling action stages along with SimCity-like strategy sections. And while neither were perfect, putting two entirely separate styles of games into one added up to a memorable experience for anyone lucky enough to play it back in the day. For the sequel though, Enix decided to completely do away with the slower-paced sim aspects and went with 100% pure action this time around, going so far as to exclaim just that right on the front of the box. But did taking away half of what made the original game so memorable hurt the experience? Or was Actraiser 2 better off for focusing on what it arguably did best the first time around? Well, grab your favorite pair of angel wings because we're about to see if Actraiser 2 was sent from the gods or languishes in the pits of hell. Jump into Actraiser 2 and you're treated to a non-playable intro that shows off the new and improved master hacking his way through some demons, leading to the oh-so-standard text crawl that explains the story. Essentially, after Tanzer was tossed back to hell at the end of the first game, he sat around and pouted about his defeat until he finally decided to get over his emo ways and take another shot at destroying the world again, only this time with the 7 deadly sins in tow to help him. You take control of the master in order to attempt to save the world from sin and chaos once again. And just like the first game, Actraiser 2's tone and story is way more mature and darker than most of your typical 16-bit games of the day, and really goes a long way in making it feel as hopeless and foreboding as the game looks and sounds. Once you're done hyping yourself up for the forthcoming fight with the devil himself, you'll be met with a much more mature version of the naked baby angel from the first game. This screen is where you can go about navigating the world map to see which level you want to jump into, and while it's nice to have the option of being able to select your stage, not all levels can be accessed until you beat another area, which your angel buddy will inform you of when you try to pick one that you can't actually play yet. So go ahead and find a level you can jump into, and then get ready to hack and slash your way through the worst of what hell has to throw at you. The gameplay in Actraiser 2 is definitely a big change from the original. As mentioned before, the sim aspects for the first game are long gone and replaced with nothing but side-scrolling action stages here, though they may not be as fast and actiony as you might be expecting going by what's advertised on the front of that box. While the first game's action stages weren't exactly adrenaline-pumping affairs due to the slower pace, Actraiser 2 takes it a step further and seems to have made your character as nimble and fast as a bus. Just walking forward seems like you're slogging through invisible mud, since the master has all of the speed and agility of a particularly out-of-shape member of the Belmont family. You do at least get a totally sweet set of wings that you can use to glide around the screen with, but even using those will take some practice, since sometimes you'll perform an effortless glide down, while other times you'll run headfirst off of a ledge or into an enemy due to their finicky nature. You'll probably spend a good chunk of time just getting used to how your wings work, since you can perform several different glides depending on what direction you press when you activate them, all of which vary wildly in how you move around the screen. Still, even after you sort of get the hang of getting around, it can still feel a bit too slow and awkward at times, especially when you need to make exact jumps and you're either too heavy or your wings just decide to once again spaz out on you. Thankfully, the combat in the game fares a good deal better than the movement, and this is where the slower pace actually makes the game feel really unique. The master once again returns with his trusty sword and shield, but you certainly can't mindlessly run up and slash at everything over and over like you did in the first game. Instead, you'll need to take a slower, more measured approach to the enemies and bosses. Basically, you'll find yourself using your shield to block enemy attacks, slash at them when they're open, and then return to blocking to avoid taking damage. While this may seem a bit slow and tedious, the game does a great job of constantly introducing new types of enemies and attack patterns so that you're always having to learn the best way to go about beating them. You also get a larger moveset this time around, being able to slash at angles all around you rather than just having a basic forward slash, which makes getting at enemies a little bit easier than just having to stand in front of their face. Magic also makes a return from the first game, but is now completely situational. Holding down the X or Y buttons causes you to charge up a magic attack, and depending on what you're doing at the time when you release those buttons will be what type of magic attack you use. For instance, just using some magic when you're standing still will result in a fire blast out in front of you, though if you use it while jumping, you'll get a spark attack that shoots out around you. There are 7 different types of magic attacks at your disposal, and figuring out when to best utilize them is another fun aspect of the combat. So while it is disappointing that Actraiser 2 ditched the SimCity type stages, it at least really beefed up the action gameplay far above the original's super easy and simple hackathon. So far, Actraiser 2 sounds like a fairly fun action game, right? Well, it is, but there's one big thing holding Actraiser 2 back from being the fun, accessible game that the original was, and that's the game's difficulty. To put it bluntly, Actraiser 2 is damn near impossible. Even on the game's easy setting, you probably won't make it a few minutes before you're staring at a continue screen. And while I generally love challenging games, Actraiser 2 just goes way off the deep end here with cheap enemies that appear out of nowhere, blind jumps into either group of enemies or a bottomless pit, and a seemingly never-ending parade of one-hit kill obstacles. While the game may only have 7 stages, which none are very long at all, you'll probably be spending hours on each one just trying to get past the endless bullshit that won't stop coming at you. This isn't even mentioning the bosses, which are even harder to deal with. And of course, like any maddening bullshit game, if you die, then you're sent all the way back to the beginning of the stage. No checkpoints or anything here. It's absolutely maddening. I can definitely understand the allure of a super challenging game, but Actraiser 2 may very well be the hardest Super NES game I've ever played, and that's saying something. So if you want a challenge, then you can't do much better than this game right here. In the end, Actraiser 2 is by no means a bad game. It just never seems to rise above being pretty okay. Add in the insane difficulty and it makes it even harder to find an audience for it besides crazy people that just want to punish themselves. So while it may be nowhere near as special or memorable as its predecessor, it does at least give the player a fun and very challenging romp through a gorgeous dark fantasy landscape. The slower pace and challenging gameplay may put some people off that were expecting the 100% pure action and excitement that the box promised, but it at least made up for it with more refined combat rather than the mindless hack-and-slash nature of the original game. Personally though, I was mostly disappointed with Actraiser 2 when I rented it as a kid due to it losing the very reason that I enjoyed playing the first game. To me, the sim sections were the real draw of Actraiser, and the action stages were there just as a nice added bonus that helped move the game along. And with Actraiser 2 going the full-on action approach, it just ended up being yet another side-scrolling action platformer sitting in an ocean of similar, better side-scrolling action platformers at the time. Even with its problems though, and its way over-the-top difficulty, I've kinda grown to enjoy it more as an adult than I did as a kid. It really has a super unique pace and feel to it that I've come to appreciate after multiple teeth-grinding playthroughs. So if you were a fan of the original Actraiser, don't go into the sequel expecting more of the same. But if you really enjoyed those action stages from the original, or just want one of the biggest challenges you can find on the Super NES, then Actraiser 2 may actually be worthy of the gods.